We're really, we don't have any time. Wilson.
We will call this meeting to order. This is Water Board work session or Water Board meeting 10-24. It's being held in Pocatello, Idaho, in the conference room of the Courtyard Hotel. And I believe it's being broadcast on YouTube. First item of business is roll call. If you could please, Jennifer.
Mr. Barker,
He is on Zoom, but he looks like he's not at his desk.
sure.
There he is. One more time, Mr. Barker.
Present.
Ms. Cole-Hansen, present. Mr. Gibbs,
Present.
Mr. McMahon,
Here.
Mr. Olmstead,
Here.
Mr. Stevenson,
Here.
Mr. Van Stone,
Here.
and Chairman Raybould.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next item of business, Mr. Patton, Mountain Home Air Force Base.
Yes.
Water resilience budget.
Mr. Chairman, we have a series of presentations this morning regarding the Mount Home Air Force Base Water Resilience Project. That, we had the opportunity to tour on Tuesday this week. Mike Morrison will lead off with the introductions for that series of presentations. Mike, you're up.
Let's see. Unmute as well. Mike, the room can't hear you. Why don't you?
Yeah, I actually haven't been able to hear you guys either. I just started hearing you a second ago. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
You didn't miss much.
Okay. And can you see my presentation?
Yes.
It should have some airplanes on it.
Yep, we can see it, Mike.
Okay, very good. Okay, then I'm going to get started. So, Chairman Raybould, members of the board, thank you again for allowing me to come and give you an update on the progress of the Mountain Home Air Force Base Water Sustainability Project. I'm going to give you a very brief update, and then after that, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of our Air Force partners, and they will let you know what's happening over on the Air Force side of things. So let's see. Project status. Project is on schedule and under budget still. That's kind of hard to believe, but we're still heading along. Pipeline work is substantially complete along Highway 167, and I was informed that we have completed 11.9 out of the 12.4 miles of pipeline that are going to connect the pump station to Mountain Home Air Force Base. Since I put together this slide, the contractor has started work in the canyon itself. They're staging materials, they're doing some site prep work, and they're improving the roadway. And if you're out there on the tour, you saw that the roadway that goes down there has got a big switchback in it. They've had to kind of iron out that switchback so that they can get their heavy equipment down there and work. So they're working on that. They're going to be starting in earnest, I think, in the next few days. And you'll probably recall that last July, I was very concerned that we were having some delays getting permits, that those delays might actually push this project out past bird season, the bird nesting season, and it could cause some problems. Well, I'm very happy to say that my pessimism was misplaced. All permits have been obtained. We are able to start construction and do construction everywhere we need to right now. There was just a little bit of a delay. You can see down here, September, we were actually scheduled to start the in-canyon work in August, and we didn't get started until the beginning of September. That's a little bit of a delay, but we're working with our contractors to try to get us back on schedule. And I'm pretty confident that by May, we are going to be done with the intake pump station, penstock, and everything else we need to be complete. And we will be ready to hand this off to the Air Force in July 2025 as planned. Well, like I said, the permitting is complete. Long lead time materials have been purchased, and most of them are in place. If you were out there, you saw that there's large piles of those long lead time materials, and we got just about everything we need to finish the project at this point. So coordination with the Air Force, and we had representatives from the Air Force out here at the Water Board most this week. We met Tuesday and Wednesday and spent a good amount of time together, getting to know each other, as well as working on a lot of coordination items with the project. One of the things we're working on is an omnibus gift package that will transfer ownership of the inlet and pump station to the Air Force. It's going to transfer all the permits and easements and rights of way to the Air Force. And it's going to include a water use agreement whereby the board will manage the Air Force's water rights on behalf of Mountain Home Air Force Base. And with that, before I introduce our Air Force partners, do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Mike, board member? I don't see any, Mike. I think we're ready to move on.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Okay, so we'll move on here. The first person I'd like to introduce in the Air Force is Ms. Shelley Schmidt, and she's a registered architect and engineer with the Installation Energy Policy and Programs Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Environment, Safety, and Infrastructure. She's pretty new to the project. In fact, I think she just started at her current position back in July, so she's new to the project. She has been out here this week, and we had a good chance to get to know her, and I think that over the next few months working with her, I think it's going to be very enjoyable and very productive. She was really good to get to know. Anyway, one thing that I found out when talking to her is that this project evidently is actually of much more interest at the Air Force than I had realized. One of the things that they're using it for is kind of a paradigm of how to work on projects like this in the future. But she's going to talk about the importance of the partnership and the impact that this project in particular has had on the development of Air Force approaches to water security at its installations across the country. And Ms. Schmidt, when you get up, just tell me when to change slides and I will do so.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I don't even need a speech anymore. You just covered
That's what I
everything
was
for
gonna
me.
Welcome, Shelley, and Mike, you need to know she has on a very pretty pair of red shoes and heels and looks great. So-
I'm a little old school, sir, so I actually did I printed out my script, but again, Mike just covered everything. I don't even know if I need a script anymore, so.
You're great. I'm old school too.
Thanks again, Mike. I appreciate you running the slides for us too. So as he mentioned, I'm Shelley Schmidt, but on behalf of the Air Force, I want to thank the Idaho Water Resources Board for having us this morning, but I also want to thank the Idaho Department of Natural Resources and the folks at Mountain Home Air Force Base for having us this week. That was an incredible experience. The drive from Boise down to here, it is just absolutely stunning. It makes me want to move to Idaho. I'm sorry, I know you guys don't like the transplants, but I'm not gonna do it. But it's been such a wonderful and enlightening experience. And I don't know about Cameron, but I've fallen in love with Idaho. I think it's a beautiful state. So thanks again for having us. Next slide, Mike. On the agenda, I'm not going to talk too long this morning. There's three things that I'm here today to talk about. The first is who I am, how I'm integrating into this process. Mike pretty much covered it. And then the second is an overview of the partnership, why we're here today. Again, Mike covered a little bit of that as well. And then the third, and I think most importantly, is to talk about what the future holds for Mountain Home. And the water security across the Department of the Air Force as a whole. So those are the three things I'm going to discuss with you quite briefly. Next slide. So that's me. I am a registered architect in the state of Hawaii and Wisconsin. I have a bachelor's in engineering, and I was recently brought on board at the Pentagon as an engineer and I have to read this because I get it wrong every time, with the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Environment, Safety, and Infrastructure, specifically to work with the energy team as the lead for water policy and water security. So, and it doesn't fit on a business card. So for short, you can just say staff IEE. So that's been a mouthful to say. You know, I'm honored to work at that office, and it's been quite an enjoyable experience. But prior to moving to the Pentagon, I was the deputy base civil engineer at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. So I'm very familiar with, you know, water issues and all of the, you know, how important the water security is for installations and the surrounding communities, and how important that is. So my role with staff IEE, it's to evaluate, like Mike said, is to evaluate the processes that took place of where we are today with Mountain Home, capture those lessons learned, and then take this project and develop our water policy based on what we have learned from it and use that across the enterprise wide, so across the Air Force, and make a good example for the rest of the, you know, the Army and the Navy, and see if we can get our whole force together. Next slide. That's me. Where we are today, for the Department and the Air Force to effectively defend our freedoms, we rely on strong partners like the Idaho Department of Water Resources Board and the Department of Natural Resources. These partnerships and collaborations allow us to support our warfighters, the military families, and maintain our aircraft so we can carry out our mission without fail. You can go to the next slide, Mike. The Idaho Water Resources Board has been a vital partner that has helped push the Waterline project forward, safeguarding the success of the mission at the Mountain Home Air Force Base. Your creativity, your flexibility, and your willingness to engage have allowed us to remain part of the Mountain Home community, and for that, we are sincerely grateful. The collaborative nature of this project has allowed us to surmount obstacles the Air Force just simply couldn't have overcome on our own. As we look to bolster our mission assurance, relationships like the ones we've established here over the last several years are a key part in ensuring the water resilience at Mountain Home. Next slide. So throughout our partnership, we're going to learn even more valuable lessons here. And those lessons are going to inform us on how we address water security across the Air Force enterprise-wide. The engagement with all of you, our local partners, it's important to understand the complexities of the interplay between water users and water supply. This has been one of the major lessons that we've taken from this project, and it's strengthened our ability to ensure access to the necessary water resources and other installations in the country. The groundbreaking event on Tuesday was a fantastic way to celebrate all of the hard work that many of you and many of the dedicated people from Mountain Home. It was an incredible experience to bring the pipeline project to fruition. So now that the water treatment plant is coming online, and the construction's beginning this month, which Mr. Bowden will talk here shortly. I'm not going to pull a mic and talk to you about it. Next phase of the project, providing Mountain Home Air Force Base with that secure and resilient water supply. Again, take the opportunity to thank the board and the Idaho Department of Natural Resources for hosting our team this week to discuss the remaining activities that still need to be executed prior to putting Snake River water to beneficial use before that February 26th timeline. So yesterday in Boise, we discussed the project contingency plan to support the transfer of the water to Mountain Home Air Force Base by next summer, as you saw, 2025. And that's ahead of that beneficial use deadline. We also discussed the timeline of executing water rights and the omnibus as a whole. And as Mike mentioned, it's designed to be that unifying document that brings all of those permitting, the regulatory documents and the agreements as part of that. IDWR and the Department of the Air Force will continue to work to prepare the official gift package for acceptance by 1 July of 2025. So in closing, I'm going to leave you with this. The Air Force is focused on the future. In the transition to a great power competition focused enterprise, we must ensure that we have competitive advantages and to do that, it means we have to safeguard our installation's resiliency. We're committed to our partner relationships and mission assurance through water assurance, because quite simply, we can't support our missions, we can't accomplish our missions without supporting our communities and the water around it, right? So along this winding road, I mean, there's been some twists and turns in this project, from what I've learned anyway. But this project has highlighted the importance of water to the Air Force, and we're taking it very seriously. We look forward to the continued success of this collaboration with you and building a water policy that benefits installations across our enterprise, as well as the neighboring communities that are helping our community along, our military community. I want to thank you for your time today, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Board members, any questions?
I tried not to talk too fast, but that was a lot to put into like a real short time frame. So.
We're in good shape. Right.
Chairman Shelley, you can transplant here anytime. You're from Minnesota, was it? So
I am from Minnesota.
the other direction that we hesitate. And I'm so glad you got to come over here and actually see the mountains, because you were probably wondering at the air base how they ever in the world called it Mountain Home, because you didn't see 20 yards any direction. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we typically require when someone moves into the state to displace 2 other people who have already lived here. In your case, we'll make an exception.
Oh, I appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. I
Okay.
appreciate your time.
Thanks for being here and thanks for being on the tour with us. I thought we had a nice day in Mountain Home.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Okay.
Coach, I think you're up.
I don't know, am I up?
I think so.
Mike-
Mike, I
Mike's-
think you
Mike's
can-
directing
Yeah.
traffic.
You can go on, Seth.
Yeah, Chairman Raybould, members of the board, just kind of an aside. Shelley actually last worked at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico, and about 3 or 4 centuries ago, when I was a young second lieutenant, I spent a few weeks there. And she and I had the most delightful conversation all about Clovis Man. She's very, very familiar with the archaeology down there. So if you get a chance, pick her brain about Clovis Man. So, moving on, our next speaker is going to be Mr. Eric Bowden. Now, he's been with the project for a couple of years. He was out here a couple of years ago. He kind of goes by the nickname of Coach. And if you get a chance to talk to Coach, please do. And he is the Chief of Operations and Training at the Air Force Civil Engineering Center's Design and Construction Branch. One thing that I found about Coach is in the past, he has been a troubleshooter for us. He has really, really helped us out on the Air Force side. He's a guy who's able to get things done. sometimes it's a matter of being able to get a hold of him and reach him, but he definitely can help get things done. I saw that. Anyway, Coach, if you could come on up, yeah, you could come on up and talk about water treatment plant design build progress and the water treatment plant schedule. That would be great.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, I wasn't planning on going with Shelley, but I'm an electrical engineer by degree, but I'm responsible for CONUS Milcon construction for the Air Force. And I am coast to coast, border to border with projects. This just happens to be one of many that I am working on. So my team is actually the execution and construction agent for new construction, which is how we're involved in the project. So when Mike talks about troubleshooting, that's typically what I am involved in is solving any of the technical funding issues, engineering, technical and funding issues for the Air Force to build a water treatment plant. As he also said, I did get the opportunity to talk to you all a couple of years ago. And Mike and I are probably pretty close in age, but I'm not sure about the centuries at Canon. But I know my memory's not as good. And so I'm not very good at, I talk about scheduling, but I'm not very good at it because when I talked to you 2 years ago, I said I was going to award a construction contract in October of 2023. Mike only delayed a month. I delayed 6. I didn't actually award it until April of this year. So, but as you can see, we are at Mountain Home Air Force Base. That's what it looks like. And there is actually a construction trailer out there. We did the groundbreaking Tuesday. For anybody that was out there to take a look at it, it looks a lot like that, except there's pipe out along the route for the water treatment plant. So we are on schedule to be able to. If you want to move to the next slide, Mike, you can. I've got other pictures if anybody wants to see them from the groundbreaking. We can go through all the details up here on anything that you're interested in, but the bottom line from the state's perspective, from my understanding, is being able to receive water from the pipeline, and that is key to this partnership. And we're going to be ready to do that, commission the pipeline and water tanks in May of next year. And I believe that means everybody's scheduled. We had a meeting yesterday to talk about that, and we're pretty much on track. We just need to iron out the connection point, make sure that we're good to go there. So that's the big piece I wanted to point out. And we're doing this as a two-track, if you will, project. So we're going to build the water tanks first to make sure that they're ready to receive water. And then as we're doing that, we'll finish up the actual treatment plant by summer of 2026. And that really is all I had to talk about, unless there were any questions for the construction side.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Eric, the water right now that the air base is using is from a well.
Mhm.
And it's being depleted.
Correct.
So are you gonna have to change the water system in the base, because you have treated water? Do you use treated water for lawn watering and stuff like that, or?
No, I'm not sure. I would have to defer to Shelley on what the MOA says about what water's being used where. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
But where the water treatment plant is being built is adjacent to the existing well. So the water treatment plant will just tie into the existing distribution system on the base side.
Okay,
I think that kind of sort of answers your question.
I think so, yeah.
As far as what water is being used where, I can't answer that.
Sir, I can answer that.
Thank you for that.
I believe they are not using potable water. No, not potable water. They're not using drinking water to water landscaping. It's not drinking water. It's not treated to drinking water levels, but they're not using gray water, if that makes sense.
yeah, I guess so, yeah, as long as it's not gray water.
Well, right now, the sole supply of water for the base is groundwater. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, once we get pipeline completed and the water treatment plant completed, the primary supply of water for the base will be the surface water from the Snake River.
Correct.
The supplemental supply still being available from ground.
That's my understanding.
Correct. They are using 2 wells currently.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, one follow-up. Is
Yeah.
any of the water, being treated today? Out at the base?
No, no, it's not.
Take it right from the well?
Right from the well.
It was good water?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Joanne, and then I
Significant,
think Mark.
changing too.
Mr. Chairman, just out of my own curiosity, how big are the raw water tanks? How many-
They're 2 3 million gallon tanks.
And then will you use them in the future for irrigation?
No, no, they actually feed the water treatment plant. So the water will come in from the pipe into the tanks and from the tanks into the plant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Coach. Well, remember I was there on Tuesday, by the way,
Absolutely.
and the treatment plant is adjacent to where we had the ceremony and but there are no tanks there or any evidence of tanks at this point.
Correct.
How long does it take to assemble or build or put a 3 million gallon tank on that location? If it's gonna be ready to receive water in May of 25.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's, so I believe the tank manufacturer is RSI, so they're a standard tank company. They're a subcontractor for our prime, our GC. And so right now you saw them out there moving dirt already. That whole setup is to get those tanks installed and ready to commission in May. So that length of time is from now until May.
Use some farm terminology. I think it's kind of like building a grain bin. But they just come in pieces and.
Yep.
and fold it or root
They
it together.
build a concrete foundation, put in some steel to anchor it to, and then bolt the tanks to it.
Yeah,
Although it holds 3 million gallons.
yeah. Until it was. Big tank.
Good.
Dean,
Mr. Chairman, Coach,
Yes, sir.
when are they gonna wet test the pipeline?
I believe Mike can probably answer that, but I think we were talking about April, and that's one of the things that we're trying to coordinate right now is how do we do that? And do we wait and fully flush the pipeline into the tanks and then muck the tanks? Or do we do it separately, and where do we put that water? That's still being worked out.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Van Stone, let's see, I think I can answer that question. We're planning on pressure testing the pipes as beginning in March. We're going to start off with air tests, and you probably, if you were out there on the tour, you saw the isolation valves. It allows us to isolate each segment, test it, make sure that it's okay. And then after that, we are going to wet test it, but of course, we're going to have to be pumping into a blind flange. In other words, we're just going to be able to pressure test the entire line, but we're not going to be able to actually move water until they have the tanks for us. We may wind up having to remove water from selected sections if we find any issues, but that would be about it, sir.
Coach, Mr. Chairman, do you have any idea, and this may be the wrong question for you, and you don't need to get into the weeds on it, but what is the treatment train at the treatment plant?
I don't know. I don't have the design details. I do know that we've got several contingencies built in for treating for just about anything. But it's fairly extensive. In fact, one of the things we were talking about, as water becomes a more scarce resource as we continue putting people everywhere, this may become a standard design for the Air Force. And we might start building more of these, depending on how water distribution needs to go in the future. Not just here in Idaho, but everywhere.
Mr. Chairman, I got one more question. When this is all said and done, the Air Force will own all the system. The pumps, if they have problems, Air Force takes care of it.
Correct.
Pay the power bill,
Correct.
and that's in the future, what, 2027?
No, we're actually accepting the pipeline itself, the gift process, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's gonna be before July of next year.
Okay, we're good.
At that point, the water treatment plant obviously isn't done, the tanks are there, but we own it. From that point forward, we're responsible for taking care of it. So when it comes down to commissioning the entire system, once the water treatment plant is done, that's our pipeline. And we'll be taking care of any issues that are there.
Okay, good, that's good. Prognosis there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having us. And I'm afraid the video isn't very good on this site, so I may have misidentified a couple of people when I was responding, and I apologize for that if I did. But I look forward to seeing you back in Boise when you get back here.
Okay, we'll be there before you know it.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, Mr. Patton.
Next item is James Cephalo for a regional manager's report.
Welcome, James. You've had a busy summer. Hey, thank you. Thanks for taking the time and coming over to the study today. Thank you. Thank you.
I think I'm gonna get started. Especially in this first slide, there's not much here. Just a little bit of my background. I've been with the department since 2007. Started working with Water District 1, but transitioned kind of over to a different position. And today I work on a lot of different things, but I serve as a hearing officer for contested cases before the department. And I was asked to be the facilitator for the groundwater management area advisory committee. I included a picture here of one of our summer trips that the family took. We went to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, which is kind of central western Colorado. If you've never been there, it's a really interesting place. It's a lot like the Grand Canyon, but whereas you can take a trail to the bottom of the canyon, in Black Canyon of the Gunnison, they have a couple of trails, but they aren't trails. So they just say, you just hike over the edge and best of luck. And so my kids and I did one of these trails. It was called the Tamichi Trail, 2,000 foot of elevation drop in 1 mile. And it was intense. We made it, we didn't make it to the river. We made it 2/3 of a mile in about 4 hours, going what we felt like was straight down the sides of like this type of stuff. So very, very interesting experience for the kids and I. We are fully staffed in our eastern region. I know that the other regional offices can't say that. We recently hired another engineer to fill a vacancy within Water District 1. And so we are fully staffed. As you can see, the Preston field offices within our eastern regional umbrella. And so I'll go down and visit the Preston field office and kind of keep track of what the Bear River adjudication staff are doing too. So we have 25 people within our eastern region. And of course, we have people assigned to do all of the programs of the department, dam safety, well drilling, and all of the water rights processing. Out of our office, we also have agents that are assigned to be the water master for the Blackfoot River, Water District 27, and the water master for Water Districts 100, 110, and 120, which are the groundwater water districts across the eastern state plain. And of course, we also have a number of people assigned to Water District 1. I wanted to just touch on kind of trends in our workload. Here is a chart showing transfer applications that are received. I don't see that there's any trend. We process probably about 150 transfer applications out of our office every year. Some can be very simple, some can be very complicated. We also process a lot of ownership changes, and I think that's a result of course, more people moving to Idaho, land is being subdivided. And if there are underlying water rights with each subdivision, we're splitting water rights and updating ownership. So we receive over 800 ownership change notices each year. A number of those are water rights that have to be split. And then permit applications. Now, the last time I spoke to you, I highlighted the fact that a number of our basins, a large portion of our eastern region is closed to new appropriations. Given the 2022 moratorium order for the entire Upper Snake River system, there aren't many things that we can approve anymore out of our region. Now, the Upper Salmon River drainages are still within our eastern region, and those are open for appropriation. So we don't get many applications for new water rights. We average about 70 per year. We have seen an uptick though in the Bear River Basin. Now, the Bear River Basin is closed for irrigation water rights, but what people are finding as they go to file claims in the adjudication is a lot of their domestic level uses out of springs. There are a lot of springs in the Bear River Basin. They never filed permits on those, and they were required to by law. So they're coming in, and we've seen a double, the number of applications from the Bear River Basin has doubled. Because I was appointed as the facilitator for the advisory committee, I did want to provide just a quick update. There were 13 representatives. We formed the committee in August of 2023, 13 representatives from various organizations. We've met 12 times as a full committee over the last year, had multiple breakout sessions. We discussed a number of topics: annual allocations, averaging, multi-year blocking, measurement, reporting, long-term, short-term objectives, curtailment or enforcement if people weren't adhering to the allocations, how to measure success, how to make future adjustments, and what to do with non-irrigation water rights, commercial uses, industrial uses, subdivision type uses. The committee was not able to reach consensus on most of those topics. I think many of you have sat in on those meetings, listened in on those meetings, and maybe weren't surprised that that's the outcome. That's okay. On August 30th of this year, I sent a memo to Director Weaver and Governor Little summarizing the committee process and providing some documents that were prepared by the various committee members. And I view that the committee actually was success. Some people may look at it and say, oh, that wasn't successful. You weren't able to reach a consensus plan. I think ultimately we were successful though at identifying and really vetting and discussing in depth a lot of those topics that ultimately are going to need to be in the management plan. And I've noted on here that there have been ongoing settlement discussions between the Surface Water Coalition and the groundwater users to resolve the Surface Water Coalition delivery call. And what's been interesting is I've been able to sit in a number of those discussions. And a lot of these same topics are being raised in that context or in that forum. And it's actually, I think, helped those discussions advance is because the people who are involved already understand some of the nuances of those discussions. Now, we're going to take a pretty big detour here. We're going to talk about Russian olives. A couple weeks ago, well, maybe I start here. There are a couple areas of the Snake River where the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer contributes or creates gains in the river. And one of those areas is just around American Falls Reservoir, particularly the north end of American Falls Reservoir. You guys have been out there. There are a number of springs that kick up, unnamed streams. There's a lot of upwelling of water in that area. I was out a couple weeks ago in the north end of American Falls Reservoir doing an inventory of water rights. And while it was nice to see what the diversions look like, I was struck at how many Russian olives there are everywhere. Vast forests is what I would call them of anywhere where there's not active farming taking place, there are forests of Russian olives. The waterways are choked with Russian olives. And I've done some investigation of Russian olives. A single tree can consume 200 gallons per day. The roots can grow up to 40 feet deep. So if we're looking at really shallow water table around the reservoir, which we are, those trees can easily access that water. As many of you know, they also grow along ditch banks. When they grow along ditch banks, they're stealing the canal water. When they grow along the north end of the reservoir, they're stealing the reach gains. I was out yesterday on the north, or I'm sorry, on a farm just east of Blackfoot. So I was visiting with Debbie Olmstead. They own a 500-acre ranch just east of the city of Blackfoot. Their property borders the equalizing reservoir. So if you guys know kind of the geography there, the Blackfoot River comes in, the Fort Hall irrigation has an equalizing reservoir where they bring water from Blackfoot Reservoir and stabilize it and then send it out through their canals. That is a very sandy place, but the water table is very high there. The farmers report that, and you can see it in aerial photos, that later in the summer, the water table will come up where there's actually standing waters in some of the low depressions. So it's also a very shallow water table. Debbie Olson reported that when they bought their farm over 40 years ago, most of that 500 acres was just open grass pasture, not watered, not irrigated, just open pasture. And within that 40 years, now there is a dense forest of Russian olives, most of the trees 40 feet high. So the Olsons have undertaken a personal fight against the Russian olives for 5 years. And while I would say they've made a dent, that's probably as far as they've gotten, is just made a dent. It's very work intensive, and you guys are shaking your heads. I think some of you canal managers probably have spent some time fighting these too. They're a hardwood and they'll grow back. It's not just you go with a chainsaw, chop it down, and your work is done, because that tree will grow back the very next year pretty significantly. And so what they're having to do is not only chop the trees down, but immediately put Roundup all around the base of the stump. And then, of course, you've got massive trees that you have to dispose of. So it's very labor intensive to get rid of all of these trees. Thousands, I was also struck as I drove through that area just east of Blackfoot, thousands of acres of Russian olives, dense Russian olives. And these are all areas where there's a shallow water table, and all of that water is flowing right to the north end of the reservoir. So I just raised that in this group. I don't know that I'm saying this to demand any sort of action from the board, but it just because we've spent a year talking about declining reach gains within the Snake River, and we've looked at groundwater pumping. I just wonder how much of an impact this is having. We do a lot of recharge projects, or you're contemplating recharge projects in the upper valley. And if we've got forests of Russian olives that are going to steal that water before it makes it to the reservoir, it kind of limits the usefulness of some of that.
Mr. Chairman, James, so it's a huge problem. I mean, it's tens of thousands of acre feet. I know just on Twin Falls Canal, thousands of acre feet, and we probably spent when I was manager, we spent probably $100,000 a year getting them out. Because like I said, it takes heavy trackhoe work and then killing you get 20 to come back from where everyone was. But so Paul Arrington appointed me a few years ago to the Department of Ag has an invasive species meeting each year. And so I went to several of those and raised the flag on Russian olives that we've got to get them listed. So then you can apply for some federal assistance and things like that if you're a landowner. But the county weed superintendents didn't want to hear any part of it. So they said it's such a big problem, we're overloaded now, we can't do it. And I tried to convince them, the way to start is let's not let them spread to anywhere where they're not. Because they keep moving up, just like they're the blight on southern Idaho, like the salt cedar is down in southern Utah and Arizona and places. And so, I mean, it's a big job to control them, but to keep them from getting to a new area is not a very big job if we just had some state and county and federal support to do it. You're right, it is. And it's not only they draw the groundwater, but they plug up all the streams too. And you slow the water down, and so you got more evaporation from everywhere. And there's very little understory under them. they become a monoculture of the whole riparian area.
They do.
So, just to follow up, James, in that area just north of American Falls Reservoir where there's an infestation. Is that on the reservation or is that on private land?
It's on state, some of it is on state land and most of it state land and private land. I didn't spend much time across the river on the reservation, so from aerial photos, it's unclear how much of a problem there is on Fort Hall. I know they have a program where they'll go out and fight, but I can't tell.
Okay, thank you. Dean,
Mr. Chairman, James. So is that number, that 1.6? That's a good number?
That is taken from an article that I found, yep, and the 200 gallons per day per tree was also in that same article.
so they're a drought tolerant tree. I know we planted some as windbreaks a long time ago. And we must not be very good windbreak farmers because most of them died, but I think it was from a lack of water. I would say that is probably a minimum with their deep roots and everything. They will find 1.6 acre feet per acre. If they're along a canal or have access to a shallow groundwater, I suspect they use much more than that.
That's, if you look at the amount of that, and you see it all over. I mean, Utah's got the same problem. Anywhere you get those. I mean, that's all of a sudden you add up all those trees. That's big water. It's a lot of water. It's huge.
It is, and you know, I haven't conducted any studies. I think it's worth further investigation. Those we've heard from Twin Falls Canal Company in our meetings, you know, they'll put up information about the reach gains and how when you hit those hot weeks of the year, all of a sudden the reach gains drop significantly. Well, the groundwater pumpers aren't cranking up their wells double speed, right? I mean, ultimately the groundwater pumping is going to be pretty steady throughout the summer. So you're saying what is causing that pretty sharp drop in reach gains? And some of it could be that the trees are drying that water up.
And the hotter it gets, the more they use. So.
Yes. So I'll move back to the presentation here. One of the other things that we've seen a lot of activity in our Eastern Regional Office is changes with water districts. As the department reached the end of the Snake River adjudication, the task then was to create water districts to regulate and administer water rights in all these various basins. So we've seen new water districts that have been created in the Upper Salmon River Basin. We've seen the expansion of water districts 110 and 120 to match model boundaries. The department is in the middle of creating water district 129 in the Portneuf River drainage for groundwater rights. And we know that there will be future water district creation as there's a call to expand the area of common groundwater supply. Creating water districts takes a lot of work. And I just wanted to point out, you know, by law, we go through these same steps with every creation or adjustment to a water district. We hold public meetings ahead of time. We then hold the official public hearing, we draft and issue orders. We have to deal with any appeals. We then find water users from the basin who are willing to serve on a steering committee to organize the districts, create budgets. Then, of course, those first couple of years, water department staff are out with the water master doing inventories of all of those diversions. And then water districts just require a lot of support. Water masters, especially if they're new to the job, require a lot of training and a lot of support. That all comes from the department. So it's not an easy process. It takes a lot of work. It's good once you have a water district up and functioning and well functioning, then it's a great leap forward, but it takes a lot of work to get there. I also wanted to touch on something that we get a lot of phone calls about in our office. And you know, I know that this board has heard a lot about the domestic exemption and domestic wells and the proliferation of domestic wells. And I'm not going to touch so much on that as much as I want to talk about the enforcement when somebody exceeds the domestic exemption. We have, of course, as you know, that the exemption limits domestic use to no more than a ½ acre of irrigation. But you'll find that subdivisions, if the individual lot sizes are bigger than about 0.7 acres, that people are watering more than a ½ acre. So I the picture here, and I maybe shouldn't have called out the Elk Ridge Estate subdivision in Jefferson County by name, but here they are. Each of these lots are one acre. And as you go in lot by lot and actually map out and say, well, how much is this lot watering? Most of them are watering about 0.7 acres. So each individual is over by 2/10 of an acre. And while any individual lot, you say, well, that's nothing. When you start considering the thousands of subdivision lots that have been developed in Jefferson County over the last even 5 to 10 years, it becomes pretty substantial. So people say, well, hey, department, why don't you go do something about that? Well, that's pretty challenging. And I wanted to talk about why that doesn't work very well. First of all, while it'd be nice to bring an enforcement action against the entire Elk Ridge Estate subdivision, that's not how the violation is occurring, right? It's an individual making an individual choice about how many acres they're watering on their own lot. So each enforcement action would have to be brought against each lot owner. Even simple enforcement cases take at least 10 hours of staff time, and those are pretty rare. Most take a lot more than that when it really comes down to it. Many of these subdivisions, especially in Jefferson County, are in canal company service boundaries. So you can see on this picture along the back end, the backside or the east side there is a canal. And you can't tell, I guess, from aerial photos, who might be actually watering from their well. No, we have probably a good guess, and who might have a pump out in the canal and might be actually watering their lawn legally with canal water. It's difficult to curtail just outside use, of course, because we aren't going to go shut off drinking water to a home. And so unless it's valved just right, it can be a little bit tricky to go and shut off just that outside use, or to just shut off 2/10 of an acre out of a full acre lot. And finally, the civil penalties for excess irrigation are $300 per acre. When you talk about 2/10 of an acre, that's pretty negligible. And I know that I've heard stories as a department took this on in the Wood River Valley. You had many homeowners that said, tell me where I send the check. Like I'll just pay you the $50 per year to water my 2/10 of an acre. They thought that it would be more of a monetary solution. So the difficulty we have, if a homeowner were to say, I'm not shutting off, then the department's only path is to bring a civil suit, right? To bring a civil action in district court. And for 2/10 of an acre, that becomes, it's not very cost effective. So I don't know what the ultimate solution is. I've typed out a couple here. Maybe there's a separate stricter penalty or a different type of a penalty for a violation of the domestic exemption. Maybe there's a way that enforcement statute could be streamlined for the domestic enforcement. And maybe we just need people dedicated full-time to enforcement of the domestic exemption. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
James, question, looking into this Elk Ridge subdivision, I think I remember there's been some issues here. Is there any surface water delivered there? Do you know?
I don't know. They're either within the Burgess, Harrison, Rudy, they're kind of in that area of the county.
I would suspect no. And the real challenge here is not only is that 7/10 of an acre being irrigated with groundwater, what was previously acred with surface water.
Yeah.
You're losing the incidental recharge from that surface irrigation. So the swing isn't just a portion of an acre foot. It's probably more like 3 or 4 acre feet per acre of change in aquifer storage.
So is there, as I recall, when they do these counties have ordinances that require dual systems when they develop these, if they have existing water with them? Or the counties just let the developers do what they want?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, in eastern Idaho, those dual systems are pretty rare at this point. Now, our hope is that they become more common, maybe given the moratorium that people will turn to those, but the county planning and zoning are not requiring those at this point.
State statutes require that?
Yeah, there is a state statute that requires that. I know, for instance, Madison County Planning and Zoning has finally got the message, and I think at least I've been told they intend to require dual systems when surface water is available on new developments. But there has been a lot of development in Madison County in the last 5 to 10 years that did not have that requirement placed on.
Sensitive subject.
It is, and I know that you're probably tracking some of the discussions within the Idaho Water Users Association. There may be some proposals to amend the domestic exemption this year. So some final thoughts, of course, growth. Everywhere in the state, that's the message, growth. We see the same thing in our office. And not only from the well drilling activity, but like I said, just the splitting of water rights and ownership changes, we see the effects in our office. I think I wanted to highlight that we would benefit from improved IT support. A lot of the things that we do require software and programs dedicated to processing water rights. I know the department is trying to update a lot of those programs right now and having more time and energy dedicated to those projects from the Office of Information Technology would help us at the regional level for sure. Like I've already mentioned in the moratorium area, because now in the entire Upper Snake River, there's a moratorium on new consumptive uses. We're seeing efforts to stretch that domestic exemption to places it's never been stretched before. Of course, you know, we talked about the classic single home, single well kind of irrigation around the home domestic exemption, but then there's the other catch-all part of the domestic exemption that says you can pump up to 2,500 gallons a day from a well and do whatever you want with it, you know, bottle it, commercial use, industrial use. We're seeing people kind of try to work on the very fringes of that domestic exemption to get things done that they need to, so that they don't have to buy and move on existing water rights. Of course, as you guys know, there was a 2023 curtailment that occurred in 2023, summertime, early summer. A lot of our staff time was dedicated to that. Not just, there's a lot of work that goes into preparing for curtailment, mapping, organizing, figuring out where the wells are located, who's going to go to what location, but our staff participated in that curtailment too. And the last maybe positive thing that I wanted to say is I know there's been a lot of negative social media posts and news articles, but ultimately out of our office, we still are having positive interactions with water users on a daily basis, providing, you know, what I think is efficient and helpful service to people, and people usually are leaving our office satisfied with that, the help that they receive. And so my last picture is another place we stopped along our travels, Natural Bridges National Monument, which is really off the beaten path in kind of southeast Utah. It was a pretty place. So I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, board members, additional questions for James? Brian?
I do want to hike with you sometime, James, because I love to hike in southern Utah in the springtime. Just if I can get in the weeds a little bit on the domestic exemption again. So the city of Twin Falls has done really well the past 20 years, requiring all subdivisions within the impact area to have dual systems. And they work very well. You know, problem is they all want to use it, you know, Twin Falls Canal delivers to them. Everybody wants to irrigate their quarter-acre lawn or whatever at 6 in the evening or 6 in the morning, and then the rest of the time they turn it all back and it goes off the canyon rim, which looks crazy. And then the other thing, if you're a mile out of town, you don't have that requirement. If you do an individual house, if you do a subdivision, then yeah, you've got to provide two different water systems. But even in my case, I've been there a long time. I'm old-fashioned. I flood irrigate with ditch water, but I use a well, and I should have to pay something for what I'm using out of that well. I pay nothing, and Dean mitigates for my well use, you know, with money and water that they have to come up with. So there should be a fee for a domestic well that you pay every year. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you know, so you don't have to enforce all the little bits of water there. At least you're paying into a mitigation fund that can be used for a project somewhere that the water board's doing. So there are ways, but nobody wants to talk about a new tax, and that's, I mean, Paul's tried. It's not a big seller.
That live.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, yeah, this topic came up within our advisory committee discussions, and kind of these same sentiments were expressed, but the difficulty is how do you get your arms around those domestic users in an effective way? Yep. We've also heard, I should also note, that the main argument against connecting to the canals is, of course, a lot of our eastern Idaho canals don't turn on until mid-May. And people want to water their lawns prior to May 15th. They want to turn on in early April. And so that can be the challenge, is that canal water is not always there when people want to water their lawns.
Okay, anything else for James?
Okay.
Thanks for coming
Yeah,
down and
thank you.
spending the morning with us. And
Yeah.
thanks for all your efforts. You're doing a great job.
We have a request to take a couple-minute break to deal with a couple of technical issues.
Oh, okay. I think we are running very efficiently this morning, so I think we could take 10 minutes.
10 minutes out of the plan.
Which will probably, okay.
Like I hit some key here and totally messed mine up. So
Bean. Mr. Patton, the next item, American Falls Dam Facilities. He's
Yes,
gonna walk us through that.
Neely Miller's he's on Zoom, gonna lead off on this topic, and then we'll have a couple of different presentations. One from the Bureau of Reclamation, one from Idaho Power.
Welcome, Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Patton. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Well, today you'll have a field trip to the American Falls Dam, and you'll be seeing a number of facilities there, including 2 board-funded projects. So I want to highlight those now. The first is the American Falls Dam Rehabilitation Project, or at least that's what I'm calling it. And this was funded by the board in July of 2023. And this was funded for $12.5 million. And this is ARPA funds. And this consists of a spillway repair, a trunnion pin replacement, guard gate frame repair, and dam intakes replacement. And the construction has been ongoing for a while and will continue through 2032. But again, through the ARPA funds, we've developed contracts that'll have all that ARPA funding allocated by the end of 2026. The second project you'll be visiting today is a Falls Irrigation Pump Station. This was funded through the Aging Infrastructure Grant in round 1. The board provided approximately $200,588 in grant funds for that project. And just briefly, that Falls Irrigation Pump Station is located just downstream of the American Falls Dam and pumps water from the reservoir through a 60-inch pipe to the head of 2 canals, the east and the west canal, and those canals convey water to the district water users via gravities. The different improvements made at the Falls Irrigation Pump Station is replacing pumps, motors, and drives for reliable water deliveries, replacing a station service transformer, installing an industrial control panel for improved pump station control and automation and remote monitoring and control, replace inlet and discharge valves that didn't seal. They installed a system motor for switchgear cooling, an electrical hoist to aid in equipment maintenance, and a recoat of the transmission lines to prolong the service life. And so you'll be hearing, following my introduction here, presentations from the Bureau of Reclamation. I believe Ryan Bliss is going to make a presentation on sort of the history, operations, and maintenance activities. And then you'll be getting a presentation, I believe, from Cresta Davis on the Idaho Power hydro facility and relicing efforts. And then when you get on site, there'll be a representative from Falls Irrigation, and they will give you a tour of that project as well. And with that, I would hand it off to Ryan Bliss from the Bureau of Reclamation to begin his presentation.
Okay, welcome, Ryan. Glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, I'll give you an introduction of myself. So I'm Ryan Bliss. I work for the Bureau of Reclamation. I'm stationed out of the Hebron office. I'm the Operations and Maintenance Program Manager. Just a quick little bit about myself. I grew up in north of Paul on a family farm on a gravel road. Graduated medical high school, went to the University of Idaho, got a mechanical engineering degree. Started my federal career with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the Lower Snake dams at Lower Granite Dam. Did my engineer training program after college in Walla Walla, Washington, and started my career post my training at McNary Lock and Dam on the Columbia River. And I did a few other jobs, and this job brought me back home. So I'm able to live near a family and help take care of aging parents. And I purely love what I do with the Bureau of Reclamation. We're responsible from Minidoka Dam all the way up to Jackson, over to Island Park and Grassy, and work with Littlewood irrigation as well, and have a lot of fun. I've worked with some of you in the past, and we're doing a lot of great things. Today, we're going to talk about American Falls Dam, some of the work we have going on today and coming up. We're excited to have you on site this afternoon. We've been coordinating with Sean Tischendorf from Falls Irrigation, Stan Bell and Cresta for Idaho Power access and information. We're gonna walk you almost 2 miles this afternoon. And the temperatures are gonna be cool enough that you shouldn't get too overheated. So if there's any issues, we'll talk about later if we need to shuffle folks around via vehicles, but excited to show you some of the great work going on. Starting off here, I was gonna share a little bit about some history of American Falls Dam. Original construction dates up there between 1925 to 1927. Those are coming up on centennial here in the next year or so. We're working with Idaho Power and the city of American Falls and Powell County, and looking at some type of a centennial recognition for American Falls Dam and facility. In the 70s, it was reconstructed, rebuilt. I threw a couple photos. We partnered up with the Powell County Museum, and they've taken all of our photos, scanned them, digitized them. So throw in there some of the early construction work, some of the early vehicles that were used. A lot of great history with American Falls Dam. The dam itself has a 78-foot operating head. And then atop of the pool of active water storage is at 4,354.5 feet. Maybe a little bit more current information. The reservoir capacity for water storage is at 1.6 million acre feet. The drainage basin that is used, that is identified, is over 13,000 square miles. We use American Falls Dam as kind of our workhorse of the system. So you'll see it fill and drain the most. It's really easy to move water downstream, a lot more difficult to go back up. So we try to keep Jackson and Palisades as full as we can and pull out from American Falls as much as we can. We're able to pass, if we had all our gates and water passages open, we could pass 121,000 cubic feet per second.
Don't ever do that.
So we have plenty of capacity.
What's the most you've passed, bypassed?
I think so I've been here for 8 years. What I understand from Keith Brooks is that 1997 was one of our bigger passages, and I think we were around 90,000 CFS-ish, but don't quote me on that. But that's what I remember as being some of our biggest releases. That reminds people where the riverbanks are. One thing on this photo, we are connected with Idaho Power. We have 2 ways to pass water at American Falls. If you look at the photo on the right-hand side, that's our spillway. At the spillway, we have low-level slide gates, and then we have high-level radial gates for flood control, flood flows. On the left side, you see Idaho Power's power plant. If you look upstream of their units, you can see the concrete. That is their penstock that's encased in concrete. If you go up on the dam, you see 3 pipes sticking up. Those are hydraulic cylinders. Those are the inlet gates. Idaho Power and Reclamation have a very close relationship. Reclamation owns the gates that control water into Idaho Power's facility. Just downstream of the dam, we have an expansion joint on the penstocks, and that's where we change ownership from Reclamation to Idaho Power. Idaho Power has controls into our gates, so they can operate in case of a load rejection or other events. They can control our low-level gates. We have a very cohesive relationship with Idaho Power at the facility, and is an enjoyable working relationship with them. I thought you guys like numbers. I was going to share with you some of how we fund work at American Falls Dam. We have cost allocations for all of our facilities. At American Falls Dam, we have 2 cost allocations. One for work we do on the dam, and then one for the reservoir. At the dam, the cost allocation is 27.8%. We do go 2 decimals out on all of our cost allocations. So 27.8% is funded by appropriations from the federal government. 33% is funded by Idaho Power through the Falling Water contract, and then 39.2% is from the space holders. And just a little bit perspective on the space holders, there's 37 individual space holders at American Falls Dam, and each one have different amounts that they have space that they're paying for. When we do work on the reservoir or around the reservoir, we have a different allocation. It's funded with 41.5% federal appropriations, and then 58.5% by our water users. I threw a couple photos on here to show you some of the things that would. Go ahead.
Mr.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
You might point out that there's 37 water users and a good percentage of those are actually above American Falls. Because of the, we manage the reservoirs together, so it's.
Yep.
It benefits people upriver and downriver.
Right. And there's space holders here that own water in American Falls and in other facilities. So as we do projects and we send bills out, there are impacts to multiple space holders due to that, in that piece. The photos identify some of the work we do. On the photo on the left is our guys there at American Falls. We have 2 staff members there full time. They're setting a used generator for emergency backup power. It was a undersized at Palisades, so we recycled it, used it at American Falls, built a new enclosure for it. And they were setting it there at the dam. That would be some work we would do funded through the dam allocation. We have a very large program, and Northside Canal Company leads it, is doing erosion control around the reservoir. We're spending somewhere between 600,000 and we're bumping up to 800,000 per year doing erosion control. Northside leads the work, and we really just fund cost, and we get so much value for the work and effort they put in. It's been a great program. We've made it around most of the dam, and we're going back and doing repairs as wave action and winter damage creates additional work for us to do. As Neely mentioned earlier, this is the grant application that was submitted, and as I understand was approved. These are the costs and the years that we are anticipating to do the work for those projects. Today, I plan to highlight work that has already been completed on the spillway repair. That work is done and fully funded out. We are in the middle of our trunnion pin replacement project. That work is ongoing today. You will see a self-erected tower crane on site and Tennessee Valley Authority on site drilling out pins and doing active work today. In 2028, we plan to start our design work for the dam intake replacement. And you see we separate things out by design effort, contract award, and then on-site construction in years out. The gate, the guard gate frame inspection repair, that is work we're doing in-house with staff. We're buying materials and then doing the work in-house each year that we can get to it. So I'm going to jump right into specific projects and get it in actual numbers. These numbers have been shared through Idaho Power with your board for actual expenditures on the project. This work is 100% complete and closed out on the contract. I won't read you the numbers in verbatim. If you have any questions, we can sure address them. So I had to throw in a photo. We did the scope of this project, in case anybody wasn't aware. We hydro demolitioned the top 8 to 16 inches of concrete and came in with a new concrete overlay and mechanically reinforced it to the mass concrete of the dam monolith itself. We were having some concrete moving and separating and causing some water movement challenges. Now we're moving into the American Falls trunnion pin replacement project. Our current project estimate is right around $7.8 million. Our first year of actual work happened last year, a year ago, and we struggled. The TVA came, we thought we had approached the first pin. The first pin was seized in place. It sheared the keyway off and all the bolts holding it in place, and we knew it was seized. It was going to be our worst pin to work on. We spent a significant amount of time boring out the pin 1/8 of an inch at a time per pass. It was tough. It's a hardened 1045 steel pin with a chrome plating is what the material of the pin is. It was originally from the 70s with a self-lubricating bushing, and it was not ever greased because it was self-lubricating. And so when it seized, it was locked up. Yeah, so it was tough. TVA learned a lot. We got one pin done last year, and it exceeded what our estimated costs were to be. As we got into the project, we looked at impacts to the community, and we knew we needed a crane. Instead of setting a crane up on the highway and stopping traffic and putting the bridge down to two-way traffic, we came up with constructing a crane pad, which you see there on the left, and then we brought in a self-erecting tower crane. And that allowed us to complete the work without any impacts to the traffic on the highway above. The nice thing is these crane pads, we'll be building one on the west side of the dam this next spring. So we'll have one on each side, and they'll be used for future work to come. That will be a great asset to the facility and be there forever. And then we can bring in more cranes in the future and have a solid place. One concern, there's a concrete wall right along the spillway there. So we had to reinforce to make sure the crane force was on the crane pad. It didn't push on the wall. So we actually bored down and have concrete pillars to bedrock.
Ryan, you mentioned because of this difficulty with the pins, that's increased cost. How about the other repairs, like the spillway and all that? Are we staying pretty close to budget on all the other stuff?
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. When the grant was submitted, request for the grant was submitted, the spillway was pretty much finalized.
Okay.
And so I think the numbers changed minimally.
Okay.
The other ones, I'll show you here in a minute, the in-house work we're doing on the guard gate frame. I think the grant number was 80,000 for FY23, and I think we spent 23,000. So that one's coming in under. Okay. So there's a little bit of fluctuation. My personal opinion is that, so what we found this year, I'll go jump to the next picture. This year, we put in place some ability to grease over the winter. We were putting in Kroll oil to try to lube up anything, loosen anything up that might be stuck. And we set up a way to put a 150-ton jack to pull them out with. Our pulling process didn't work. 150 tons, they didn't budge this year. However, they were able to machine out the first 4 inches, the head of the pin. I'll just jump right in. So here's a picture of the pin. That bottom piece of the pin is a head 4 inches thick. These pins are almost 16 inches in diameter. They're big steel pins to work with. Once we machined off that first 4 to 8 inches of the pin, we're able to pull them out. So this year we've already got 2 pulled out, and I think we're going to get ahead of schedule this year. And I think our costs and our estimated costs are going to reflect a reduced cost. Is my personal opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Here you can see this is what you'll see today. We have scaffolding set up under the pins for the guys to work off of, and then we have scaffolding and beams spanning for access for staff. As you can see there, we're targeting to work on gates 3, half of 4, because we got half of 4 done last year, and gate 5 this year. I was a little bit concerned when we couldn't pull the pins, but now how quick the machining work is going, I'm optimistic that we'll get through all of those gates and we'll get ahead of schedule. TVA has committed staff on site through early November. The work has to be completed between the window of water coming off the reservoir, down on the reservoir, water off the gates, and before it comes back up in the fall. And we had a pretty good carryover this year. We have a very good staff from Tennessee Valley Authority. They've been great to work with. We learned a lot last year, and they came this year prepared to go. We have 2 crews working at the same time up here on the spillway. The next project, this is our in-house staff. They're working on replacing and adjusting wedges and seals on our low-level slide gates. From the farm, we were used to rubber seals. Here we use bronze seals that close up as we bring down the gates. And the wedges, just like your garage doors, you get close to ceiling, it pushes it up against the seals. These gates are our first time our overhaul. Our in-house staff, they're pulling things apart. We're doing some fixing some coating issues, and adjusting and replacing materials that have been damaged or need replaced. Like I mentioned, in FY23, our cost estimated was 80,000. We ended up being at 26,800. This year, we were not able to complete all the work. We did some purchasing of materials to have on hand. We have 2 staff members at American Falls. One of them decided to take an opportunity within reclamation, and he's now our maintenance man at Jackson Dam. And so we were down to one maintenance guy at American Falls, and he was not able to get to any work this year. It's kind of a two-man job anyway. So this year was, so it'll push out work for future years. But I think, at least on this project, our numbers are in good shape. Are there any questions on the projects for American Falls Dam?
Board members, any questions?
So, Mr. Chairman, me, Ryan. So these pins, the problems with the TVA guys come out, this must be a common problem with this design.
So a bearing has a defined life.
Right.
This is gonna get some of my opinions. I think in the seventies, self-lubricated bushings were kind of new in their technology and their development. And we're in a really, really rough location. The county puts salt down on the highway and they push snow over. We get a lot of challenges with environmental considerations. On our new design, we're still using self-lubricating bushings, but we're putting in a grease zerks. And we have helical grease grooves in our bushing. And the grease intent is just to keep foreign material out.
Keep pushing the junk out.
Right.
Anything else? I think we're good.
So what was the diameter of those bushings?
So the pin is about
Okay,
15-inch in diameter, and then the bushing's outside of that.
15-inch pin, that's.
And when we set the bushing, we soak it in dry ice and slide it in as an interference fit. Yeah, this stuff, we're using cranes and jacks. And as we're on site today, you'll see their work area. If you look directly overhead, there's a platform above them. And so to get material in, it's a little additional challenge to get the material brought into the area because you can't be vertical overhead with the crane.
Swing.
How heavy are the pins?
They are right under 2,000 pounds, around 1,800 pounds. Yeah. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan, tongue in cheek a bit, but manual gauge that you read at the dam for water level, and you have obviously automation too.
We have a staff gauge.
This Ted Deal always told me that if he could just sneak in sometime and raise the staff gauge half a foot, we could store 50,000 more acre feet. Won't work anymore.
We have digital telemetry installed there as well. We struggle with wave action. Wind is a challenge. Waves can increase the pool level up to as much as 3+ feet. We have a video of a windstorm came through and it pushed waves over top of our gates, over between the side of the dam and Idaho Power's penstocks, and caused some erosion of some of the soils there.
That counts as natural flow.
Or you, Ryan. Reach game.
Please.
So I was gonna walk through, we're gonna talk.
We'll get back on track. You got it.
So we're excited to have you on site. We're gonna talk a lot about safety. Safety is always most important to us, to Idaho Power. We always make sure safety is of the utmost importance, and then we take that into first consideration. We'll do a safety briefing when we get to site as well, but just some consideration for you. If there's any emergency, you're welcome to call 911. American Falls Hospital is the closest medical facility to us. There are first aid kits available in government vehicles and in the government office buildings. We'll want to watch our slips, trips, and falls. We will be walking multiple flights of stairs. Watch your footing and use the handrails. We are around Highway 39. We'll be crossing it. We'll provide hard hats, safety vests, and safety glasses for you to use today. When we're down under the downstream side of the dam, we will be walking under the highway. There are falling objects off the highway. So we'll be using hard hats to make sure we keep everybody safe. We will be walking through a construction area to get from the dam over to Falls pumping plant. And that requires hard hat, high vis vests, and safety glasses as well. And if you know Keith and Nicole, we had to throw them in the presentation somewhere. So that's those two there. That is my last slide. Any questions from anybody?
Mr. Chairman,
Dean.
So you have a partnership with the hydro with Idaho Power, is that, are there any other Bureau of Reclamation facilities that partner with? You know, where the Bureau owns the dam and another company owns the generation, is that very common or?
Yeah. We have it twice in Upper State. Island Park Dam is owned by Bureau of Reclamation. It's operated and maintained by Fremont Madison, but Fall River Electric owns the power plant.
Okay.
It's not super common, but does exist.
I think we're good. We'll be on our best behavior when we're on site. Okay. Back to Neely or Cynthia?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I might just jump in. Neely mentioned that Idaho Power is going to give us a presentation here, but I actually want to just take a moment to, rather than introducing Cresta, introduce Andrea Courtney. Some of you may remember that Andrea spent some time with us at IWR and for the state as a Deputy Attorney General. But she's now going to present on behalf of Idaho Power as I believe the hydro licensing lead is now your new title, but we'll let you introduce yourself also. Welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, I'm Cresta's lesser sister. So, thank you, Neely.
Is there some kind of a limit on how many employees one company can poach from the department? No?
The Attorney General's office, just to be
Okay.
clear, but
Okay.
yes, my heart is with several places throughout the state, that's for sure.
We're glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. What's the second? Yes. Okay. Yep. Okay. Perfect. Okay. We'll check. Grab a few ways just in case it didn't feel great. As Cynthia said, my name is Andrea Courtney. I currently work for Idaho Power. Have had the pleasure of working and serving in a number of capacities here in the state. I'm happy to be in front of all of you distinguished members, chairman, director, and others here in the audience, as well as out in Zoom land. I'm here to discuss relicensing of American Falls Hydropower Plant with FERC. And just so I can get a sense of your knowledge base, because I've been with Idaho Power for a little over a year. I knew very little about FERC. I knew next to nothing about relicensing. So I'm assuming that's most people, but just wanted to check so I don't bore you. Raise your hand. Are you familiar with hydropower? Let's start with an easy one. Now, Barbara, you don't have to raise your hand. Now, raise your hand if you know what FERC stands for. Okay, you guys are exceptional. And then if you know about FERC hydro licenses. Okay, all right. I'm gonna sit down because you guys, you've got this. I'm gonna talk about a few things. Wait, maybe. Nope, not that way. I can do it that way. Go over the importance of hydropower. I don't think you all know that though. Give you a map so you can see some context as to where our hydropower facilities are. Talk a little bit about the power plant history. I'm going to dovetail a little bit with what Ryan shared with you today. Give you some additional current pictures. I love pictures. I think it really helps. And then talk a little bit about the FERC highlights and explain key dates in our American Falls relicensing, and then give you a sense of a few of the notable issues from the relicensing itself. This is a busy slide. It's only up there to show you that in 2023, Idaho Power's energy mix was over a third based on hydroelectric power. We operate 17 hydroelectric projects on the Snake River, and it's the least expensive method of generating electricity for our ever-growing customer base. I know James talked a little bit about that as well. All of the peoples. This is our service area. And you can see it starts, it's the light teal color. And so above American Falls, all the way through southern Idaho up into the Idaho-Oregon border. Our first hydroelectric plant is that star for American Falls. It goes all the way up to Hells Canyon. It's got the 3 gems, as we call them, the Hells Canyon, Oxbow, and Brownlee. Together, those 3 hydropower plants produce approximately 70% of Idaho Power's hydropower generation. And that means in a normal water year, and I know how frequent those are, about 30% of Idaho Power's total energy generated. Idaho Power has seen an increase in customers through the years. I think Cresta gave this slide at the start of my term with Idaho Power, and I think it was over 600,000. It keeps inching up. Idaho Power has been at this for over 100 years. They started in 1916. So let's focus on American Falls. Apologies for those that don't get to get the Zoom portion of this. I love these old pictures. So the top part is the island plant. Power production at American Falls predates Idaho Power's operations. The American Falls Power, Light, and Water Company produced power on the island in the center of the falls in 1902. That's the island plant and dam. Charles Johnson was the first operator of the island plant, and he wrote on July 17th of 1902, he, quote, had the privilege of starting the first unit of the island plant in American Falls to transmit 3-phase power to Pocatello at 33,000 volts. He said they did that before the walls and the roofs were completed on the buildings. Subsequently, a power plant was completed on the west side. That's the box directly below the island plant. And that was operated in conjunction with the island plant. And then the power plant on the east side of the falls was completed in 1913. It was the only one of the 3 original plants that remained in service when Idaho Power acquired it in 1916. Idaho Power rebuilt it then and then replaced it along with that concurrent discussion that Ryan had with reclamation in the 70s. It's blocked out on part of this screen. This is from the Idaho Sunday Statesman from 1925. American Falls made the best town in Idaho by a dam site. Love this. In 1927, the Bureau of Rec completed the mile-wide dam across the Snake River at American Falls, forming the largest storage reservoir on the Snake. President Calvin Coolidge sent his congratulations at the time. Reclamation's work helped provide water to make the desert productive in large parts of southern Idaho, some 900,000 acres of beneficial use. And what started out as crop and livestock harvest has transformed a little bit, as you are all aware, but historically it was potatoes, grains, sugar beets, dry beans, dry peas, onions, seed crops, fruit, sweetened field corn, alfalfa, hops, and mint. Very busy. This is a much clearer picture. This was from 1928. This is the American Falls Power Station. This is the east plant that sits below the dam that pulls that water for the irrigators. The 1927 dam was part of the Minidoka project. And this was Idaho, Wyoming, and US contracting with certain organizations and individuals, the capital W water users, for various amounts of storage space in that dam. And the water users agreed to pay a proportionate share of the cost. The US retained the ownership, as Ryan talked about, and operates and maintains the dam, primarily for furnishing the water for irrigation purposes. The dam was supposed to last forever, but gradual alkaline deterioration weakened the concrete structure, so it can only safely store about 60% of its capacity by the early 70s. Less clear picture, unfortunately. I don't know how that happened, but 1978, this is after some reconstruction. So in 1972, before this, but after the last photo, the US restricted storage for the top 11 or so feet of the dam year-round for safety. The US determined the dam was, quote, no longer structurally competent I think that's engineer speak for not sound. Recognizing the present and future storage restrictions would have impacts on and severe economic loss to the capital W water users. It would reduce recreation benefits and have adverse effects on the fish and wildlife. A majority of the irrigator groups who had water rights opted to form a joint venture with Idaho Power and move independently towards construction of the new dam as a joint venture. It ultimately gained congressional approval, worked with reclamation. You may have heard of the falling water contract. Ryan mentioned that at the start. It's part of this great history and part of that intricate relationship that Idaho Power has with the Bureau of Rec. The American Falls Reservoir District was a state instrumentality. It contracted with Idaho Power in early '76. And part of that was for the replacement dam, this new one shown in the picture. In the falling water contract, Idaho Power agreed to pay $19.5 million toward the cost of the construction of the new dam in 40 approximately equal installments annually for its utilization of the power generation at the power plant for that quote falling water released from that replacement dam for irrigation and other purposes. When I was practicing this in front of my 15-year-old son, he said, "Mom, you got to tell people what 19.5 million is in today's dollars because no one knows." All right. So forgive me if you do know, it's over 100 million now in today's money. The new plant was built to generate 2.5 to 3 times the amount of water of the old plant. It was completed in 1978. That's the date of the picture. Two things from the falling water contract. Yes, once upon a time I was an attorney, so I dig this stuff. It specifically says that in the event Idaho Power's license with FERC for this water power plant is renewed, then the falling water contract shall be continued in effect for the new license. Second, the space holders, as we've discussed, were explicitly, quote, in fact, third-party beneficiaries of the obligations of Idaho Power to make the falling water payments. Found that interesting. All right, newer photos. This is a high angle view of the power plant, similar to what Ryan showed you. It is fascinating how the construction, and you'll see it, like the intricacy, right? The pins that go into all of this, the penstock design, the turbines, all of it. And there's a crane. It's too bad for Bureau of Rec's purposes that Idaho Power's crane is fixed, and it's for the installation of the heavy equipment there at the power plant, because it would have been really helpful. But unfortunately, for Bureau of Rec, ours is stuck there. But it's a fascinating way, and you'll get to see some more in the tour. Another high angle view facing the reservoir looking northeast. And then here's the other direction looking southeast where you can see those irrigated fields. Specific to this audience, I'll share some water context as well. Idaho Power has hydropower rights at the project, which are non-consumptive and incidental to the Bureau of Rec's operational strategy. It's within Water District 1. It operates the project on flows released by reclamation. Water quality impacts of the reservoir are neither a project effect nor the responsibility of Idaho Power. But this says FERC and the Federal Power Act. So put back on some of the legal context. FERC stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It's responsible for regulating hydroelectric power throughout the U.S. and wholesale transmission and sale of it. FERC shares some features with the Water Resource Board. I had to look a little into this just to see. Of course, FERC is bigger. And in the year I've worked for Idaho Power, I've met one person from FERC in person and talked to a few on the phone. So this already is a plus. It has a secretary and main decision maker, a board and staff, both legal and technical, as does the board. You guys span the state's geography, which I think is amazing. To some extent, FERC does that. It's got some working offices, the closest of which to us is in Portland. Most of the decisions are made back in DC. Maybe that's a negative for some of us that live out in the West and things are just different here, but that's where they're placed. The Federal Power Act is the statute that authorizes FERC to issue the hydropower licenses. When FERC does that, they are to consider, and I'll read part of this, consider the power and development purposes for which the license are issued. But they also have to balance and give equal consideration to the purposes of energy, conservation, the protection, mitigation of damage to, and enhancement of fish and wildlife, protection of recreational opportunities, and other aspects of environmental quality. So they're there for hydropower licenses, and they're trying to strike a unique balance between making sure that there's protection, mitigation, and enhancement such that any effect of the project, construction or operation is lessened. They're looking for that balance between the hydropower generation, which is so critical, and also making sure that we leave the area either as good or better, hopefully, than how we found it. FERC considers recommendations of federal and state agencies exercising control over flood control, irrigation, recreation, cultural resources, as well as tribes affected by the project, especially as to fish and wildlife and habitat. The licenses for the public or for the power plants, if they are granted, involve those PME measures, that protection, mitigation, and enhancement. And then by the time the license is issued, there is a voluminous record upon which FERC bases its decision, similar to the board. Here we've got scoping, applicant studies, NEPA analysis and NEPA documents, additional information requests, meetings, required consultations, settlement, things you're all quite familiar with. That significant public engagement allows years of opportunity for people to be part of the relicensing efforts. There's an e-library that FERC has, and just like any kind of case, there's a service list with docket notice. You can search Idaho Power facilities or anywhere else in the nation. It's a pretty fantastic resource. The process for relicensing can take between 5 and 10 years, although for the Hells Canyon relicensing, we're 20 plus. It depends on the complexity of the issues, the parties involved, what studies are needed, et cetera. And again, FERC is looking for that balance that's critical. Here's the timeline for American Falls. The current license was issued in 75. It expires in February of 2025. You'll notice there's that purple arrow that shows that there's something going on after the license expires. That's normal in the FERC world. After a license expires, you continue to operate the plant pursuant to what's called an annual license. FERC gives all of the conditions and requirements for your normal license, and it just continues year to year until that eventual relicense is made. We had to give notice to the public between 5 and 5.5 years of when the license expires, and then filed that new application 2 years out from the expiration. Today, this is very exciting. We are hoping to hear from DEQ on something that is related to the relicensing. We're expecting our next FERC document in October. After the license is issued, we continue working with FERC, but in a more compliance-based effort. We do a lot of reports, inspections, deliverables, payments, et cetera. We're hoping for the relicense to be issued April, May, June, we'll see. But sometime in 2025. Some of the issues that we face with the relicensing include the Clean Water Act certification, fish stocking and recreation. The first of which was Clean Water Act Section 401. That's a requirement that FERC cannot issue a license unless it's been approved by the certifying agency or tribe in the state. They've got to grant that water quality certification here in Idaho. It's the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. The Clean Water Act regulations changed and were effective last fall. That has provided some obstacles, opportunities. We've been working with IDEQ, providing hopefully sufficient information for them to be able to make that certification. Once they issue that, FERC will roll those conditions into the license. Specifically, some of the water we received from the reservoir has low dissolved oxygen. We mitigate that with DEQ from the original license from 1975 with the contract with DEQ from 1980. And it says basically we need to use blowers. They're called atmospheric aspirators. They're blowers to increase the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. That's much better for the fish. And we do that We are going to probably have some enhancements to that DO work, as well as monitor for total dissolved gases with this next certification. That process with DEQ is separate from the FERC relicensing, but is required as part of it. So DEQ takes care of all the public notification with it. Opportunities for hearing, lots of ways for people to get involved and express their support for Idaho Power as we go through this. But hopefully that is about finished, and we look forward to that certification today, crossing fingers. Fish stocking, the state was concerned about impacts on fisheries from entrainment and the turbines. Specifically, the governor's office, DEQ, and Fish and Game. In this relicensing, they stated that they recognized Idaho Power's longstanding commitments towards stewarding fish and wildlife resources associated with the project, especially noted the popular and productive fisheries downstream, which provides significant economic support to Power County. We had an agreement with Fish and Game previously to provide 8,000 pounds of trout released to the reservoir annually as part of the relicensing. We agreed we would increase that to 24,000 pounds of hatchery reared trout into the reservoir annually. Really good fishing, and that will be incorporated into the new license as well. Last of the issues to highlight is recreation. If you've had the opportunity to see any of Idaho Power's rec sites, there are 4 at the American Falls locations developed. They're all public, so they're available for anyone to use. It includes Trenner Memorial Park, American Falls Park, an Oregon Trail boat ramp that's operated by Power County through a lease with Idaho Power, and then some improved fishing and access on the west side. There's a litany of like barbecues, ADA restrooms, ADA boat dock, there's parking, there's limited camping, but it's free. All of that is there. Idaho Power conducts recreational surveys. We do traffic counts. So we keep a pretty good pulse on the recreational use, scope, and needs. As part of the relicensing, we are working collaboratively with Power County on a number of things, helping them with both construction work, financial commitments, and making the area better for recreation. Resolving all of those issues is important. That's part of how Idaho Power meets FERC's requirements to prove the protection, mitigation, and enhancement of all of those resources. So thank you for your attention. Can't wait to be on a tour with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions there or here.
Okay, board members, any questions? Brian?
Mr. Chairman, Courtney, no, it's not, it's
Miss Courtney's fine, but Andrea.
Miss Courtney, Andrea's what I meant.
It happens.
Are they cutthroats or rainbows that you stock, or both?
You know, I wish I would have brought someone from the hatchery because I don't know the answer, Preston, you might, but I don't.
So she looks like a cutthroat.
So, okay, I'll tell you the secret about the picture. I don't fish. So I looked through some of our trout pictures. I don't know if it was I don't think it's a bull trout. But yes, the
B-roll, right?
right. It's trout. They didn't hire me for fishing.
It is a fish, it is a
Yes,
fish.
it is a fish, and it is the of the type. I knew I should have asked.
That was
That's
taken
right.
in New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. Olmstead. Yes, you found the secret, the fish. Okay, any other questions that I could answer? Thank you. All right.
I think we're good. Thank you. Okay, is that?
Yeah, that concludes, I think, the American Falls part of the
Yeah.
agenda. I think it's a-
Sure does, and I
Okay.
think lunch will be next, and we'll be heading over to American Falls. Our goal is to be there at 1 p.m. I think to meet everybody on site. We'll also be visiting with representatives from Falls Irrigation District there. Jennifer, I don't know if we have any information on our lunch plans, but
It should be ready at 11:30 in the
Okay.
lounge.
11:30 in the lounge, and then we'll try and leave here. Let's all meet in the lobby by about 12:30. And we'll head over.
Okay, and everyone is invited to lunch, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we have enough lunch for everyone.
That's a good fish.
Okay, before we, I ask for adjournment, board members, is there any non-action items we need to take care of this morning? We good? Well, I'll ask that again tomorrow, but right now. Is there anything you want to bring up? Anything on that side of the room? Okay, who wants to adjourn this session?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.